A 5-year silence cannot hide what was left behind in the damp soil. Welcome to Swasti Diaries. I am Brynn Gallagher, and for years the official narrative surrounding the St. Ambrose School woods remained entirely unchallenged. A tragic accident, a lonely teacher walking home through the freezing mist. But official records lie when powerful people have enough to lose. When police pulled the victim's frozen body from the brush, they missed a vital, glaring contradiction sitting right in plain sight. Mr. Larkin did not wander into the dark by choice. Someone lured him there, meticulously staged the scene, and walked away with a clean slate while the entire administration looked the other way. 5 years later, I am stepping back into the shadows of that campus, armed with recovered documents, contradictory testimonies, and a desperate need to uncover the truth. How does a beloved teacher end up murdered in the woods behind his own school? And who orchestrated a 5-year cover-up involving false alibis and institutional silence? The answers are buried deep, and the investigation begins tonight. Before Mr. Larkin ever walked out into that freezing December mist, he always kept a small, neatly folded linen handkerchief tucked into his left coat pocket, right beside a half-eaten peppermint drop he never got around to finishing. Those small, quiet human habits are what remain long after the institutional silence seals over a tragedy. Returning to St. Ambrose School meant confronting buried memories of the night he died, and the whispers that followed 3 local teenagers who were conveniently blamed for the chaos. The official files called it a tragic accident, a lonely teacher losing his footing in the dark woods behind the campus perimeter. But the physical reality of the crime scene flatly contradicted the clean narrative constructed by the board. Mr. Larkin did not wander into the brush by choice, and the heavy wooden rear door of the school building held secrets that no administrator wanted uncovered. As I stepped back onto the damp pavement under the pale moonlight, the initial layer of deception began to peel away. Who actually provided the false alibi for the night of the murder? And what dark truths did Mr. Larkin unearth in the weeks before his final bell rang out across the silent halls? Archival footage and police logs revealed Mr. Larkin's body discovered in the woods behind the school campus on a freezing October midnight. The official narrative rested on the assumption that a lone educator had simply lost his footing on the sloping embankment. Yet the physical reality preserved in the crime scene photographs told an entirely different story. Mr. Larkin's shoes were remarkably clean of the thick, clay-heavy mud that coated the surrounding tree roots, suggesting his final resting place was not where he originally fell. Instead of natural stumbling marks, the damp soil bore the distinct, heavy drag patterns of rubber-soled footwear moving away toward the perimeter fence. The school administration was quick to classify the incident as a tragic accident, sealing the local precinct reports within 24 hours of discovery. But a quiet inspection of the victim's personal belongings yielded an overlooked anomaly. Tucked deep inside the waterproof lining of his briefcase was a handwritten logbook containing names, dates, and financial figures that directly contradicted the school's public budget statements. Someone had meticulously scrubbed the digital servers for weeks, but they failed to account for the analog paper trail left rotting in a damp drawer. The physical evidence did not point toward a random late-night wandering. It pointed directly toward a targeted extraction, staged to look like a mishap in the dark. And yet, the most jarring contradiction rested in the exact timing of the coroner's core temperature analysis, which clashed violently with the alibi provided by the lead school administrator. The analog paper trail inside Mr. Larkin's briefcase opened a doorway into a far larger institutional deception. When I cross-referenced the handwritten financial logs with the digital archives preserved on an unformatted backup drive, the inconsistencies multiplied. The St. Ambrose School administration had spent years systematically manipulating scholarship funds and falsifying academic records to secure state grants, and Mr. Larkin had documented every single fraudulent transaction. Tripp Talbot, the primary suspect paraded before the local press 5 years ago, was never the mastermind behind the embezzlement ring. Tripp was simply a convenient scapegoat whose own illicit after-hours activities on campus made him an easy target for a frame-up. The police logs claim Tripp was miles away at the exact hour of the murder, Yet the recovered digital timestamps placed his vehicle idling near the western perimeter gate right when Mr. Larkin was being forced into the freezing mist. But the most damning piece of physical evidence was not a digital file or a financial ledger. It was an audio transcript recovered from a discarded microcassette recorder tucked behind the chemistry lab sink. The transcript recorded a heated confrontation between Mr. Larkin and an unidentified faculty member, just 48 hours before the fatal incident. The voices on the tape discussed a missing ledger and a threat of immediate exposure to the school board. Yet, when the official police report summarized that exact audio file, the transcript was altered to omit the second voice entirely, protecting a member of the teaching staff while cementing the illusion of a solitary, tragic accident. The false alibi was not constructed by the students. It was fabricated from the top down. The digital logs painted a far more intricate puzzle than the simple narrative pushed by the administration. When the vehicle tracking data from the western perimeter gate was finally decoupled from the school's internal server, it revealed that Tripp Talbot's car had indeed been idling near the fence on the night of the murder. But the precise timestamps told an entirely different story. Tripp arrived at the perimeter a full hour after the coroner's estimated window of death. He was not there to accost Mr. Larkin, nor was he staging a struggle in the frozen brush. His presence was tied to an illicit campus trade, a petty after-hours transaction completely separate from the educator's demise. The realization shifted the entire investigative framework. Someone within the administration had intentionally doctored the preliminary incident reports, splicing Tripp's vehicle logs into the exact hour of the attack precisely because those logs offered an easy, ready-made villain for the local police to arrest. The false alibi was never crafted by the panicked teenagers. It was engineered by a calculating mind sitting behind a mahogany desk inside the main administrative wing. If Tripp Talbot was miles away or arriving too late to have intercepted the teacher in the clearing, then the primary suspect collapsed entirely, which left a terrifying vacuum at the center of the case file, pointing directly toward a staff member who possessed both the keys to the rear security doors and a powerful motive to silence a dissenting voice. The collapse of the student scapegoat theory left the administration vulnerable, forcing the investigation to look closely at the adults who actually held the keys to the building. Two distinct figures emerged from the shadows of the faculty roster, each possessing a profound motive to ensure Mr. Larkin never spoke to the school board. First, there was Shane Archer, the assistant bursar who managed the institution's day-to-day accounts and possessed unrestricted access to the digital servers where the scholarship funds vanished. Shane had a reputation for living far beyond his modest salary, funding expensive property acquisitions through undocumented wire transfers that mirrored the exact financial anomalies Mr. Larkin had highlighted in his handwritten logbook. Then there was Charlotte Vance, the senior academic counselor whose signature appeared on every falsified transcript used to secure state grant renewals. Charlotte controlled the student grade tampering ring, turning a blind eye to academic blackmail in exchange for institutional protection and career advancement. Both individuals had the physical access, both had the financial incentive, and both were on campus during the precise hour of the educator's death. Yet, as the financial audit deepened, a darker reality surfaced. Neither Shane nor Charlotte operated in a vacuum. Someone higher up the institutional ladder was orchestrating their movements, using their secret corruptions as leverage to force compliance. The false alibis provided to the police were not amateur mistakes. They were carefully coordinated defenses designed to protect the ultimate architect of the embezzlement ring. The physical evidence pointed toward a systematic conspiracy, leaving behind a trail of manipulated ledgers and compromised silence that stretched all the way to the executive offices. The deeper the investigation dug into the administrative archives, the faster the institutional defenses began to fracture. Someone inside St. Ambrose School was watching every single step of the inquiry. Late Tuesday evening, upon returning to the small makeshift desk set up in the campus annex, a plain manila envelope sat squarely in the center of the wooden surface. There was no return address, no digital watermark, and no signature. Inside lay a single, typed index card featuring a chillingly specific warning about digging too close to the financial board's private accounts, alongside a torn fragment of institutional letterhead, matching the exact paper stock used in the principal's office 5 years ago. This was not the work of anonymous student pranksters or random neighborhood vandals. It was a direct, calculated countermove by an adult who realized the false alibis were crumbling under real scrutiny. The anonymous note proved that the cover-up was active, ongoing, and desperately trying to bury the truth before the audio transcripts and financial ledgers reached the wider public. If the administration believed a simple intimidation tactic would halt the search for Mr. Larkin's killer, they fundamentally miscalculated the resolve behind this investigation. Every threat only confirmed that the trail was leading directly to the right doorway. The anonymous threat left on the desk was designed to intimidate, but it achieved the exact opposite effect. It confirmed that the administration's defensive perimeter was fracturing from within. Turning away from the threatening note, my attention fell toward the recovered locker key recovered from the bottom of Mr. Larkin's desk drawer. A physical artifact that the school's internal security team had somehow missed during their hasty sweep 5 years ago. When that key was finally tested against the rusted padlock of locker 114 in the damp, subterranean basement of the north wing, the heavy iron tumblers yielded with a sharp click. Inside the dark, narrow compartment sat a metal tin box, untouched by time and protected from the moisture of the lower hallways. Stored inside were not student pranks or missing gradebooks, but a collection of typewritten correspondence between the school bursar and an external corporate entity that specialized in funneling institutional assets offshore. Most devastating of all was a signed ledger page bearing the principal's own handwriting, outlining a systematic plan to discredit any faculty member who questioned the missing scholarship funds. The physical evidence completely shattered the long-standing assumption that the students were responsible for the corruption. The trail of guilt shifted away from the teenage scapegoats and pointed directly toward the executive offices on the top floor. Yet, as the pages of the metal tin were carefully laid out across the wooden desk under the harsh glow of a single desk lamp, a glaring omission stopped the investigation cold. One name appeared at the center of every financial transaction, yet his official employment records had been entirely wiped from the school archives 5 years ago to the day. Who was the ghost employee pulling the strings behind the administrative board? The missing name inside the financial ledger was not a clerical oversight or an accidental deletion. It was the deliberate signature of an administrator who understood how to weaponize the school's bureaucratic machinery against anyone who threatened the flow of illicit funds. Mr. Larkin did not stumble into his fate because of a random late-night wandering through the campus perimeter. He was targeted because his meticulous handwritten logs exposed a 5-year embezzlement ring that funneled state grants into private offshore accounts controlled from the executive suite. The false alibi provided for the night of the murder was engineered by someone with absolute authority over the campus security systems and the staff rosters. Shane Archer and Charlotte Vance were merely compliant cogs in a much larger machine, manipulated through fear and compromised by their own minor indiscretions. The true motive behind Mr. Larkin's silencing was purely financial desperation and the preservation of institutional reputation at any cost. As the decrypted files on the backup drive revealed, the final confrontation in the damp woods behind the school was not an impulsive act of adolescent rage. It was a premeditated extraction, coordinated down to the minute, designed to protect a massive administrative fraud. Yet, a crucial piece of the puzzle remained unaccounted for. Why was Trip Talbot's vehicle idling near the western perimeter gate precisely during the fatal hour, if the students were entirely innocent of the crime? For nearly 5 days, the weight of the investigation pointed squarely toward a disgraced former principal who had hastily resigned just hours after Mr. Larkin's body was discovered. The paperwork recovered from the executive office safe seemed to lock the case into place. Signed transfer orders, offshore routing slips, and a typed confession draft found tucked inside his personal desk calendar. It looked like the ultimate resolution. The administrative board had found their scapegoat, pinning 5 years of systemic embezzlement and the fatal confrontation on a man who had already fled the jurisdiction. The narrative was clean, polished, and desperately convenient. But physical evidence refuses to bend to administrative convenience. When the forensic audit examined the ink density and paper fiber of the supposed confession draft, an undeniable contradiction shattered the entire theory. The document had been printed on a high-speed laser printer model that St. Ambrose School did not even purchase until 3 years after the murder occurred. A retroactively fabricated confession could not place a man at a crime scene that happened half a decade prior. The former principal was merely another pawn, manipulated to take the fall while the true architect remained completely insulated behind institutional walls. The search for the second voice on the audio cassette and the real hand behind the cover-up suddenly widened once more, proving that the deepest deception was still hiding in plain sight. The forged confession draft was a clumsy distraction, but it finally pointed my thoughts backward toward a small piece of personal history I had long locked away. When I pulled out the old cardboard box of childhood keepsakes, the ones from my time as a student at St. Ambrose School, a single photograph slipped from the pages of an old yearbook. It was a Polaroid snapped on the night of the winter formal, dated exactly 5 years ago, just hours before Mr. Larkin's life was extinguished in the dark brush. In the background of that frame, half hidden by the heavy iron scrollwork of the courtyard gate, stood a familiar leather-bound briefcase resting against a faculty member's distinctive wool coat. For half a decade, trauma had fractured my memory, burying the face of the person I saw standing near the western perimeter at midnight. But looking at the Polaroid under the harsh glare of my desk lamp, the repressed fragments suddenly slammed back into place with undeniable clarity. I had not seen a teenager lurking in the shadows. I had seen the school's current bursar, Shane Archer, clutching the stolen financial ledgers while arguing with someone whose voice I would recognize anywhere. The false alibis, the manipulated audit trails, and the administrative threats were all deployed to protect the man holding that briefcase. The physical evidence from the childhood photograph confirmed that the real architect of the embezzlement ring and the cover-up was hiding right inside the administrative wing all along. The final pieces of the puzzle were falling into alignment, exposing a conspiracy built on institutional survival and cold-blooded betrayal. Every door was unlocked now, and the truth could no longer be contained by school board silence. The reconstructed timeline fell into place not through guesswork, but through the hard geometry of physical placement and recovered traces. Shane Archer did not act as a lone wolf executing a clumsy midnight ambush. The evidence recovered from the subterranean locker and the restored Polaroid revealed a calculated choreography of deception. On that freezing December night, Mr. Larkin was summoned to the rear courtyard under the guise of an urgent administrative review. The heavy iron gate, usually chained from sunset to dawn, remained unlocked just long enough for the confrontation to unfold in the damp brush behind the chemistry block. Footprints preserved in the clay near the perimeter fence matched the distinct tread pattern of industrial work boots, issued exclusively to the bursar's department. Mr. Larkin had confronted Shane over the missing state scholarship funds, brandishing the handwritten financial logbook that exposed the entire offshore embezzlement ring. But the final strike was never about a sudden argument or adolescent rage. It was a premeditated extraction, executed to protect the institutional hierarchy from complete exposure. The audio cassette recovered from behind the lab sink captured the exact moment the voices shifted from negotiation to physical coercion, before the recording was intentionally altered by administrative staff to shield the true culprit. Every fabricated alibi, every forged confession draft, and every threatening note was part of a desperate 5-year containment strategy designed to bury the truth beneath layers of institutional bureaucracy. Yet, as the physical evidence aligned with the restored memory of the courtyard gate, one final question remained unanswered. Why was Trip Talbot's vehicle idling near the western perimeter gate precisely during the fatal hour if the students were entirely innocent of the crime? The final puzzle piece did not rest within a forged confession or an anonymous threat. It hid quietly inside the unverified alibi provided by Shane Archer 5 years ago, when the audio telemetry from the campus security server was scrubbed of administrative suppression It revealed a hidden digital handshake that occurred precisely at midnight. Shane had claimed he was off-campus managing regional accounts, but the recovered toll plaza telemetry placed his personal sedan idling less than 2 miles from the St. Ambrose perimeter at the exact hour of Mr. Larkin's final confrontation. More damning still, the voice underlying the second track of the microcassette recording matched Shane's distinct speech cadence, completely dismantling his claim of ignorance. The false alibi was not merely an administrative shield. It was an active deception constructed by the man who pulled the trigger and manipulated the board into blaming the students. With the alibi thoroughly dismantled, the physical evidence pointed to an inescapable conclusion. The institutional cover-up had finally run out of runway, exposing the true architect of the tragedy hiding behind a clean desk and a falsified ledger. Shane Archer orchestrated the murder of Mr. Larkin, acting as the primary mastermind behind the 5-year institutional cover-up at St. Ambrose School. The financial leverage Shane held over the school board was absolute. His oversight of the digital accounts allowed him to systematically blackmail the administrators who had signed off on the missing scholarship funds. Mr. Larkin discovered this massive embezzlement ring just days before his death, uncovering the exact paper trail that pointed straight to Shane's offshore routing numbers. Faced with immediate exposure and ruin, Shane arranged the fatal confrontation in the damp woods behind the chemistry block, utilizing his master key to lure the educator into the freezing mist. The second voice captured on the altered microcassette recording belonged entirely to Shane, whose defensive alibi collapsed when toll plaza telemetry placed his personal sedan near the western perimeter gate at midnight. Tripp Talbot's vehicle was idling near that same gate because Tripp was engaging in an unrelated after-hours transaction, completely unaware of the violent extraction unfolding mere yards away. Shane exploited Tripp's presence, manipulating the preliminary police logs to frame the students and protect his executive corruption. When confronted with the restored audio telemetry and the recovered financial ledgers during the late-night broadcast recording, the institutional facade finally fractured completely. The systemic silence crumbled under the weight of undeniable physical evidence, leaving the true architect of the tragedy exposed and entirely without defense. The flashing red and blue squad car lights finally cut their silent sweep across the St. Ambrose campus, leaving behind a profound stillness that the old brick walls had not known in 5 years. Shane Archer was gone, escorted into the damp midnight mist under the weight of undeniable physical evidence and digital telemetry that no institutional silence could ever bury again. The handwritten financial ledgers, the altered microcassette tapes, and the recovered records of systemic embezzlement were now in the hands of federal investigators who refused to look away. Returning to that makeshift desk in the annex, my gaze drifted down toward the small, neatly folded linen handkerchief resting beside a forgotten peppermint drop, the quiet human habit left behind by a beloved teacher who simply refused to be silenced by corruption. The ghosts of that winter night were finally laid to rest, not by institutional mercy, but by the relentless pursuit of truth through the dark. If you appreciate true crime told with analytical depth and absolute fidelity to the evidence, please subscribe to Swasti Diaries.